We are back with the Olympiad, everybody, and I'm going to be showing you the game that I played yesterday against Algeria, which was round number 6 of the chess Olympiad. Some very good moments happened in the game, and I'm going to be telling you all about it. But yeah, so I was quite tired, and so I decided to film the recap today. So today's a free day of the Olympiad. If my hair looks a bit weird, it's because I just got a massage and they put oil in my hair. So guys, hope you learned lots of things from this game because I promise that I did. And yeah, let's go ahead and get into the game. So I had the black pieces against Women International Master Lina Nasser, and she was rated about 2011, I believe. And actually, I played against this girl a few years ago in Turkey in the World Junior Chess Championship, and I beat her back then 4 years ago. So this was, the revenge. I played with the black pieces last time too. This is the revenge, and I'm not gonna tell you how it went, but okay, you'll have to watch the whole video to see how it went. Okay, all right. Let's get into it. I don't know why I'm so excited, but I'm very excited to show you this. All right, so everybody, she went d4 and I went d5. She played knight f3 and I went knight f6. And I knew that she probably was not going to go c4 very early on. She went e3 in this position, and this is actually what I played in round number 2. In round number 3 against Marta Garcia, so from Spain. This is the Collie system. So I went e6, I'm right now just playing a symmetrical position. Bishop d3, bishop d6, it's still very symmetrical. And now she went for b3. Now the idea of b3 is that, well, at some point she's gonna go c4, she's just preparing it, and she just wants to bring the bishop out this way, because this pawn over here is already blocking the bishop, so the bishop doesn't have any future on this diagonal. Now in round number 3 against Marta, she played b6 and was really controlling this e4 square, so I decided to go for the same thing. Although first I castled, and after bishop b2 I went b6, and the idea of b6 is that I just want to go bishop b7, and then I want to put a knight over here on e4, and the bishop is just going to be defending this square forever. So she went knight b2 to bring the knight out, develop it, and now I'm bishop b7. So we're both just very quickly developing as much as possible. She went castles, and here I went for knight e4. The knight is going to the center, and yeah, I love having a knight over here. This knight is controlling quite a lot, and I also had some tactical ideas, which I thought were very cool. So there's actually sometimes some ideas that I want to show you. If something like c4, knight d2, and queen c2, and f5, and let's say that, white does something like completely random, I don't know, let's go ahead and say that they go like rook c1 or something random. In this position, sometimes you can actually take over here, because in this position, if queen takes, so then I have knight takes pawn takes c4, and when they take back, I'm going to be able to take this knight over here and completely destroy the pawn structure. And if knight takes over here, then I can also take on c4, and in this position, after bishop takes c4, you can sometimes go bishop takes h2, check, and this is kind of crazy. King takes h2, and then there is queen h4, and after king g1, there is bishop takes g2, and this is a crazy line. And well, the idea is that if takes, it's going to be a checkmate after queen g5 check, king somewhere, and rook f6. And if you don't take, well, then I'm coming in with the queen. So there is some crazy stuff in this line. It may look very, calm, but there is some tactical things going on here. So in the game, she went for c4, but I actually played this a little bit incorrectly. I forgot this theory that I had been looking at before, and I went f5. Now, f5 is not a great move because, well, I should have gone knight d7, just like I showed you. This is actually like what I had prepared and what I wanted to do. The idea of f5, it's just that I'm gonna be able to take with the f pawn. So I like playing f5, but I just want to go knight d7 and then f5. And the difference is that if I go knight d7 and she goes knight e5, I can sometimes actually go f6. Although f6, I mean, it kind of depends. f6 is not always amazing because, well, sometimes you can take and then go knight here. But okay, but at least I have the possibility to go f6 at some point. So I went f5 and I did this in the wrong move order. Now she was able to take on d5. And after pawn takes d5, I decided to take back with the pawn. Maybe I should have taken with the bishop. I am still not entirely sure. I was thinking about going knight takes d2, queen takes d2, and then bishop takes d5. But the reason I didn't do it was because I thought that sometimes she might be able to f3, e4 and kind of kick me away. But maybe it would have been better to take with the bishop because my bishop became a little bit like blocked. As how the game went. So I took with the pawn, she went knight e5, and now this knight was very annoying, so I went knight d7. And yeah, I'm trying to just bring my pieces out, and I'm trying to exchange, my knight for her knight. And here she went for knight f3, and okay, in this position, I thought that at some point I need to go c5. I thought that if, my pawn is here forever, this square on c6 might get weak. She might be able to bring a rook in somehow, and I thought this square might get weak. So I went c5, and now she took on d7. I took back, and she took here because she wanted to be able to bring a knight, to e5. Now this knight here is very good, and she's going to be able to go f4 at some point and super defended. But the thing is that whenever she goes f4, that will stop her from being able to go f3, and then my knight will be pretty good here too. And typically she doesn't really want to take here. Well, it kind of depends, but if she takes here, then my rook is going to be coming up, and okay, she needs to go f4 before that because otherwise this f2 pawn is going to become a big weakness. So after my queen was under attack, I was actually thinking for a while here. I was thinking about all sorts of different moves, and I ended up going queen e7, but I was also thinking about going queen e6. Because then if something like f3, I was considering a bunch of different things, but I was actually considering something like bishop takes e5, pawn takes e5, and c4. But I came to a conclusion that I didn't like this, simply due to f takes e4. She takes my knight, and after I take on d3, well, then I just realized that e takes f5, and then, rook takes, and then queen takes d3. I didn't really like this because my queen is kind of stuck here. Like, if I move my queen, then this pawn might be able to push, and this bishop is going to become a monster. And she will probably just be able to go queen d4, block my pawn, block my bishop, and put the queen and bishop in the same diagonal. And yeah, I just thought that, her pieces would be more active than mine. So I didn't really like this position. So I decided to not go for this, and also with the queen on e6, I always need to be careful about a bishop being able to get on this diagonal. That is always something that's a bit scary. So I went queen e7, and she went f3. She kicked away my knight. Now, in this position, I was, looking at all sorts of things as well. I was looking at things such as takes, because well, if she takes back, then I'm just able to take, queen takes, so that is not really possible. And I was calculating like pawn takes, and then bishop takes e5, and f takes e4, and maybe this was the best line over here. But once again, I wasn't entirely sure about how this position was after taking the bishop on d3. I wasn't sure if I actually liked this, because I kind of felt the same thing, that the queen is going to go on d4, the queen is going to be really well placed, the bishop is going to be good, and my bishop is going to suck. So I wasn't entirely convinced about this. So I was looking at all of these sorts of things, but I ended up going knight g5 instead after f3, because I thought that actually my knight on e6 might be pretty good, because it's actually attacking this pawn on d4, but it's also maybe helping me with the advance of f4. Going f4 sometimes might be good, because then I'm able to exchange this pawn for this pawn, and this pawn is defending this pawn. So if I'm able to exchange this pawn for this one, then I will be able to exchange this one for this one. There will be no pawn here, and then this knight will become a weakness. So, the pawn chase, you always need to kind of think about what pawn is defending what, and, all of that kind of stuff. So she went f4 here because she didn't want to, well, she didn't want to let me, I think, go either f4 or, go knight e6. So she went f4 in this position. And then I just took my knight back to e4. My knight now is good. There's no pawn that will ever be able to kick me away. So she decided to take my knight. And actually, I was pretty happy when she took it because now my bishop might become amazing in this diagonal. This bishop is probably going to become really, really great here because now the light squares are going to be very weak. So I was actually quite happy here. And she went queen g4. And okay, I thought that in this position I probably need to be a little bit careful. And I wasn't sure if I wanted to go bishop a6 or if I wanted to go bishop c8 first and kick the queen away. I decided to go bishop c8 first. And well, the queen has to move. f5 is not really a good move because I'll be able to go queen f6 and this pawn will fall. So she went in this position queen e2, and then I went a5 because I wanted to at some point be able to go a4 and maybe c4 to get a passed pawn over here. And I also open up for my rook. So she went here rook f d1. And here I finally decided to take the knight over here. I thought that the knight was pretty strong. And well, the idea of a5 was also before it. The idea was to go... The idea of going a5... The idea of going a5 is also to go bishop a6, for this pin. So she had to move the rook, and that's, she decided to go to d1. And now that the rook was gone from the f-file, I decided to take on e5 because she doesn't want to take with the f-pawn, because if she takes with the f-pawn, then my rook is going to become super active on the f-file. So she needs to take with the d-pawn. And then after d takes e5, now because the rook is not here anymore, she can't start pushing f5, f6, which was what I was scared of before. So I went queen e6 here just to stop g4. I knew that g4 was probably a threat, but also I wanted to avoid her from taking my pawn on d5, of course. So I went queen e6, she went rook d2, and here I went for bishop a6, just to confuse the queen, and then she went for queen h5. Now, in this position, I went for rook a d8 because I wasn't sure if d4 was working immediately. Now, probably d4 was working immediately, but I was pretty low on time here, and I was scared of stuff like takes, and e3. I was scared of stuff like d5, which I'm not really entirely sure why I was scared of this, because my pawn is just going to become very strong, and this is, pretty much winning for black. I can go queen e8, and then, my pawn will just be able to push, but for some reason, I got really scared for these two pawns, and because I was in time trouble, I didn't have exactly time to calculate this, so I didn't go for it, but I did see that you're going d4, and probably that was the best move. So I went rook a d8 to then, threaten. So I went rook a d8 to threaten d4, and she went rook a d1, and then I went bishop d3, which I think is pretty good, but, I think d4 was always the strongest move. The idea of bishop d3 is just that I'm blocking the rooks from being able to do anything on this file. So, here... She went rook e1. I think that, well, she was just trying to move her pieces around a bit. We were in time trouble. And here I went queen g6. Now, I thought that if queen takes g6, that I would just have a better endgame because I saw that my queen side pawns were going to be very, very strong. And a pawn over here would also prevent white from kind of pushing their pawns on the king side. So I thought that I would have a better endgame. Now, probably she should not exchange queens. Probably she should go queen h4, but she exchanged queens here. And I went here, so she exchanged queens here, and after h4, I went b5, just because I really wanted to start my queen side attack. Now, I think that perhaps king f7 would have been a bit better, because if king f7, g4, king e6, I'm stopping her from going f5 and, pushing all her pawns on the king side. But yeah, but I went for b5, and here I really think she needs to go g4. But she went for a3, which I think is a mistake. And then I was able to go for b4. I am just trying to lock this bishop. I'm trying to put my pawns on dark squares, because then this bishop will have a lot of movement. And then also, my opponent's bishop will not be able to block all the squares. So on b4, she took on b4. I took back with my a pawn. And now it's actually pretty sad that my rook had gone to d8, because now if my rook was on a8, my rook would be a lot better on this open file. She went rook c1, and now I have a great position. I went c4, And my pawns were just rolling. My pawns were just pushing. Now I'm threatening c3. This is a fork. So she went bishop d4. And I went rook a8 here, which I think is a good move. But it would have been even better if my rook already was on the a file. So finally she went g4. And I went c3. And well, lady of c3 is just that I'm starting to push my pawns. But actually, I think it might have been better to first go rook a3. Because if she ever takes this pawn, then I'm going to have two passed pawns in the 5th file. Or in the 5th rank. And when you have two passed pawns in the 5th rank like this, I mean, it's almost always winning. My bishop is also like, you know, controlling the promotion square, so she can never take here. So I think it might have been better to really force her to go rook a3 and kind of really force her to take than to go for c3, which was the move that I did. She went rook d1 here, and I went rook a3 just to attack this pawn. And now she went bishop c5. Both attacking my rook and attacking this pawn. Now in this position, I made a mistake. I should have sacrificed my exchange because, I mean, this rook doesn't really matter. I can take on b3, and I'm just threatening to go c2 and then to just go rook up, and I mean, my pawns will win. But I was in time trouble, and I tried to save my pawn, so I went rook b8, and that was a mistake due to rook takes c3. Now, I had seen this, but I still thought that this pawn would win very easily. The idea of rook takes c3 is that when I take the rook back, then my rook is hanging. But I thought that this pawn was going to become very strong. Of course, I don't have like two passed pawns right now. But still, I thought that this pawn would really be able to become very, very strong here. So, in this position, she went bishop c1. And I went bishop g4. I went bishop e2 to attack both the rook, but also to threaten bishop takes g4. Now, the idea is that if rook takes d5, it looks like I'm hanging a pawn. I have rook b1, and after king f2, I have bishop takes g4. And okay, this bishop is almost trapped. The rook cannot go back. So there is bishop a3, and in this position, my idea was just to go rook a1. And now, you know, this bishop is under attack. If the bishop goes somewhere in this diagonal, I will just push, and I will make a queen. So the rook needs to come to a5, and then I'll just be able to push, and I'll be able to make a queen, because if the bishop takes, I'll be able to take the rook. So this is just completely winning. Best move here is rook c5, and then I'll be able to take the bishop. So she couldn't take on d5, so she went rook e1 after bishop e2, and then I took the pawn on g4. So I knew that here that it was a different colored bishop endgame, but I thought that because we still had the rooks and because I still had this pawn, I thought that this, you know, would be easily winning. This was move 38. I was in deep time trouble. I just had a few seconds left and I had to make two moves in a row. She went king f2. I went king f7. She went rook g1. And I did a big mistake here. So this is move 40. And in this position, it's really important for me to go bishop either f3 or bishop h5, just because then I'm stopping the king from ever entering this side of the board. Now, I made a mistake. I quickly played bishop f5 just because I wanted to at some point go d4, e6, and, you know, sacrifice this for I don't know what. I thought that my bishop would become strong in this diagonal. Now, this is a big mistake because what I'm doing now is that I'm letting the king enter. So, you know, as soon as I did this move and, you know, I started thinking a bit, I realized how big of a mistake this was because actually I cannot even go back. I cannot go back to this diagonal. My bishop needs to be in this diagonal and I have no idea of how to get to that diagonal. So I didn't really know how I was going to get back there. She went king e1, and I was calculating all sorts of things here, and I came to a conclusion. I was calculating here both bishop d7 to try to put my bishop on this diagonal, and d4. These were the two moves that I was calculating. I was calculating d4, pawn takes d4, and then I was calculating c2. Because after c2, the king cannot really enter, and I knew that if I'm able to put my rook over here, I should probably be winning, or if I'm just able to get the rook to the other side. Because I was thinking if king d2, then I can go e3. And if king e2, I can go rook d3. But actually, I I wasn't entirely sure of how this was because, okay, I've given a pawn, but also this pawn is hanging and I couldn't find the immediate win. I mean, if something like, well, let's say rook e1, if something like rook d1, there's bishop takes g3, and okay, I mean, this bishop will always defend the promotion square. I mean, I have bishop g4 check, but the king will go to f2, the king will stay here on f2, and I wasn't entirely sure about how this was. I thought this was very unclear. So after thinking for 13 minutes, I went for bishop d7. I already thought, half of my extra time that I got in move 40 on this move. And the idea here was that I thought that her plan of king e1 was to go king d1, and then I thought bishop a4, and then I was thinking king c2. This is her only way of doing this, because if she doesn't do it this way, then I'm gonna have time to put my pieces together. I mean, now I'm threatening to go rook check and now forcing her out of here. So, and that's what I need. I need the king to just not enter. So she has to go king c2 in a position like this. This did not happen in the game, by the way. And here I was thinking about d4, and I'm actually really happy that I saw this whole line in my head. I was thinking about d4, and after d4, she has to take, because if she doesn't take, I'll be able to go e6 check, and okay, then I'm gonna have 2 passed pawns on the 6th rank, and they're just gonna promote, they're just gonna be rolling. So she has to take, and then the idea was to go rook a3 check. The only move, the king cannot go anywhere, the only move is to go king b1, and then I was thinking of c2 check. Now the idea is that after king b2, which is the only move, rook b3, she cannot take the pawn now on c2 because of the fact that I went d4, because of the idea of d4. After d4 pawn takes, I now have rook b3. I can take my rook to the other side. I have rook b3 check, and I'm winning the rook, and this is completely winning. I'll be a rook up in an endgame. So she can't do that. So the only move is to go king a2. And okay, in this position, I was thinking that I can probably, I wasn't entirely sure, but I was thinking, this is actually where my calculation ended. But okay, I was thinking that this had to be winning. I mean, maybe I can go rook b1 or something. And now this rook cannot move. This bishop cannot really move because of bishop e3. Because the bishop is pinned, right? So if bishop e3, I can just take, and then make a queen. So I didn't really entirely see how she could progress here. But she went for a different idea. She did not go for the king d1 idea that I was thinking about. She went for rook g2, which is a much better move. And I actually missed this defensive idea. And the idea of rook g2 is that she's just going to try to put the rook on c2. And from this square, both attack this bishop and both defend this bishop and attack my pawn. So bishop b5 was the move that I ended up doing here. I was thinking of bishop a4. I wasn't entirely sure about what to do after rook c2. I wasn't entirely sure of how to continue. Maybe here I can actually just go king e6 and then d4 and then bring the king up. Maybe this is what I should have done actually. This could have been an idea, but I ended up going bishop b5. The idea being of going bishop d3, but perhaps I think actually bishop a4 would have been a better move here. So she went rook a2, and this is also a really good move, and I went for bishop d3. And I knew in this position that, we will be exchanging rooks, but even if I did something like king e6, I was thinking, rook a3. I was thinking that this would, perhaps be the same, but perhaps this is better because once again, I've gained the tempo. So this endgame is actually pretty interesting. There's a lot of different things to this endgame. So perhaps it would have been better to bring my king first before bishop d3 because, well, the idea of bishop d3 was to stop rook c2, but with my king, going up, I'll gain a tempo because my king needs to be on e6 anyways at all points. In this position, the team had already they had already played like 2-2, so I knew that I only needed a draw for us to win the match. So I knew that it was really important for me to not over push in any single way and make sure that I really get that draw. Obviously, in this position, it's pretty much impossible for me to lose, but still, I needed to make sure that I didn't lose under any circumstances. So bishop d3, rook a3, and here I exchanged. And okay, I really thought that here was a draw, and now we can see the difference. In the previous position, my king would already have been on e6, which would probably have been better. So I went king e6 now. She went bishop b4, just threatening my pawn, and I went c2, just so that my pawn is forever defended. She brought the king back, and here I was trying to get any sort of, activity. I knew that different colored bishop endgames are pretty much always a draw because each bishop will be able to control a different amount of squares, and overall, like, all squares will be able to be, like, controlled. Like, it's very hard for me to, like, control the dark squares, which I need to if I'm going to be pushing my pawn to dark squares. So I went for the only idea which I had which was to go d4 and try to get 2 passed pawns. Now after d4, she probably, well, I'm not sure if she should take. I mean, maybe bishop c5 here is better because then if takes, she can take back. But she took. And then I had 2 passed pawns and I was happy then. So I went e3 check, and the idea here is that she cannot take this pawn. She cannot take this bishop because if she takes any of this, I can make a queen. So she has to go king c1. And here I went king d5. I'm threatening this to take this pawn, and my plan was to bring the king in and try to control, these squares. I knew that if I'm able to bring my king to c8, I'm winning. Because without pushing this pawn, it's important for me to not over push my pawns. My pawn should be on dark squares, just so that the bishop cannot really enter and control the squares. So I really wanted to get my king to c8, and I knew that if I did that, there would be no way for her to prevent me from promoting here or here without sacrificing a bishop. And if I win her bishop, then I'm winning the endgame with these 2 pawns. I'll be able to get all the pawns with my king, and then these pawns will win. So I knew this. So I was really pushing here still. I did not give up. I knew that this was probably a draw. I knew that I had misplayed before, but I tried to really, fight here. So I went king d5, bishop e1, and here actually I went for a kind of, an idea. I could take here, but I knew that if I take, okay, then she will go e6, and then my king cannot really go here, so I will have to go like bishop b5, and I will lose this pawn. And if I lose this pawn in this circumstances, it's a dead draw. It's going to be very easy for her to stop this pawn from promoting. So I went bishop f5. The idea being that after, she went first bishop a5, and I took on d4. The idea being that after e6, I now have freed up a square for my king. So I'll be able to go king d3. I'm not taking this pawn because if I take, then I'm losing this pawn. And after e7, then I can go bishop d7. And now I was on my path of getting the king to the square where I wanted to go. But still, this is, probably still a draw. She went bishop b6, which was a good move. And I went bishop a4 just because, just to defend this pawn. But whenever my king gets, too far, she will always be able to, go there, takes, and then I'll lose this pawn. But okay, I was trying. So bishop a7, I went king e2, really trying to get my king up there. The issue is that whenever my king gets to f1, this pawn is hanging. So now, she wanted to take my c2 pawn, and so she promoted. I took the queen, she took the pawn, I went bishop a4 check. She went king c3, and here, I went king f3. Yeah, king f3, king f2, they're gonna be the same thing. The issue is that I really just want to be able to have my king here and be able to push, but with the bishop on this diagonal, the pawn is always pinned. So I went king f3, she went king d3, I went check to get the king away from that file. She went king c2, and then I took on f4. And I thought that, okay, if I'm able to take this pawn, then I'll be able to get 2 passed pawns, and that is still a theoretical draw. To have this passed pawn here and this. Probably if I had 1 passed pawn here and this one, it would be winning. But with the passed pawns like this, with just 1 file between each other, it's a theoretical draw. So I was trying to do that just to at least confuse her. And okay, in this position, I probably made a mistake. I was pretty low on time and I went king f3. Probably my best chance here would have been to go e2 check, and after king e1, g5, because then after h takes g5 and king takes g5, at least I will have, 2 passed pawns. And okay, this is a draw, but she has to play this out. If she goes wrong, then it's winning. So probably this was my best chance to just try to have 2 passed pawns. But I made a mistake. I went king f3. In time travel, king e1, yeah, e2, so bishop c5, I went king g4, and now she could just go bishop e7, and then we just started going back and forth, and this is just now a dead draw. There's nothing that I can do. I will never be able to take this pawn. I'll never be able to, push this one, and this king will stay forever over here and stop this pawn from promoting. So everybody, it became a draw. I had a great great position, and I messed up time travel. But nonetheless, I was pretty happy with the game. I felt like I had calculated quite a lot of things, and I was pretty happy with the game. We ended up winning the match, which was important. So, you know, that's in these tournaments, what the team does is always the most important. And but yeah, I was pretty happy with the game, and I was pretty happy that I was able to get such a good position against her. Tomorrow we're playing in Singapore, so wish us luck. I hope you guys enjoyed the recap of round number 6. I'll be back for a recap of round number 7. Thank you everyone so much for watching. Hope your endgames improved a little bit from watching this. I'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye!